Over the next several weeks, the American International Podcast will be exploring some of the films that AIP presented exclusively in their television packages as part of their American International Television division. Many of these films were imported from foreign markets, others were made specifically to be included as part of their television packages, and a few were picked up from other domestic distributors following their theatrical runs. In this series, we will be looking at films that are associated with the AIP as a result of being presented in these television packages.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that's
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're going to make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first.
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hello and welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And today we're continuing our look at American International television output. This week we're talking about Colossus and the Amazon Queen from 1960, released by AITV in 1964.
Colossus and the Amazon Queen was directed by Vittorio Sala, from a screenplay by Ennio de Concini, Fulvio, Augusto Frassinetti, Giorgio Mordini, Vittorio Nino Novarese, Duccio Tessari, and Vittorio Sala. It was produced by Paolo Moffa for Galatea Film, and the English language version was produced by Alta Vista.
Colossus and the Amazon Queen stars Rod Taylor as Pirros, Ed Fury as Glaucos, Dorian Gray as Antiope, Daniela Rocca as Melitta, Gianna Maria Canali as La Regina, the Queen, Alberto Farnese as Losco, a pirate, Volko Lulli as Pachydermy, Alfredo Varelli as Merchant Number 1, Gino Bozanca as Merchant Number 2.
Also appearing are Ignazio Leone as Sofo, Adriana Facchetti as Sacerdota, Paoli Falci as an Amazon, Renato Tagliani as Nando, Enzo Cerusico as Menandro, and Marco Tulli as Yumio.
Colossus and the Amazon Queen begins with credits rolling over a burlap background as 50s jazz and then ragtime plays.
Yeah, the music sounds like it would be at home behind a silent era comedy.
Nickelodeon music. The movie starts and there's some sort of formal event happening. And we get our first indication that this is going to be a comedy when one of the men whose job is to blow a horn bobbles his instrument and then blows a sour note.
An announcement is made that it is time for the tournament finals. And this is a contest meant for display, as that even in defeat, they say you will be smiling because your defeat means the victory of a comrade.
And what it is a bunch of men just fighting in a field. One-on-one. It's kind of like a rugby scrum, but there's no ball. It's just men fighting, and eventually there's only one man standing.
It actually gets pretty vicious, with all the unconscious bodies lying around and people pounding each other in the head.
I don't think they're all unconscious, though. I think when they go down, they have to stay down. That seems to be the rule. So in the end, there is one man standing. This is Glaucos. And he has drawn the attention of two men who look like Vulcans. They're interested in Glaucos because he's a muscle man.
They pass by as Pirros, who will be the other hero of our story.
He is bragging to some ladies very elaborately about his imagined exploits during the tournament, and the men just call him on his lies. He did none of that.
Next, we find ourselves at a local watering hole where Pirros is sitting alone at a table, asking passersby for maybe a little money so he can get some wine. And the two men who were teasing him earlier sit down with him. He says he's not buying, but it's okay because they are.
And they correctly deduce that he isn't buying anything because he has no money, got a pain in his wallet, and they offer him a job as a kind of watchman for the cargo they have sitting on their ship. They bring out a coin purse, put it on the table. Pirros accepts the job, but before he can pocket the money, they tell him that he has to bring another man with him.
Pirros looks over to see which man they're talking about, and it's Glaucos. And as everyone is watching, he throws over a table, and a large-scale brawl starts. This does not interrupt the three men's conversation.
Now they tell Pirros that they already asked Glaucos, but he said no. Pirros is calmly counting his money as chaos surrounds him. They're even throwing jugs and stuff over his head, and that doesn't stop him. Pirros assures them that he'll get Glaucos on board.
And now we're on a ship at sea, and we see that Pirros kept to his word. Glaucos is unconscious on the deck, and Pirros says that all it took to convince him to come along was a pat on the head.
He's bound, but as he wakes, he easily throws off his ropes. Then he starts fighting again. He doesn't want to be on the ship. He wants to be put on shore. Obviously, they can't do that. So he tries to take the mast out of the ship just to show them how serious he is about getting off.
Pirros realizes that his friend is not going to be cooperative, so he goes down to the hold, where he finds an axe, and he hacks a hole in the hull of the ship. He calls up to Glaucos that the ship is sinking. Glaucos stops what he's doing to run down and try to fix the situation.
He body blocks the water coming in until it can be patched. Pirros gloats that his quick thinking saved the day. Later on, the men are playing manly games on deck, and we see another man. An Egyptian man, you can tell by his headdress, comes out and says he's there by mistake. This is Sopho. He talks to Glaucos, and somehow they become friends. They're bonding over both not wanting to be on that particular ship.
But they won't be on the ship for long because the island that they're headed toward is in sight. And I guess they're as close as they're going to be getting, so everybody jumps overboard to head to shore.
They all wade to shore, and there's a queen's treasure waiting for them on the sand. It's the payment for the cargo, according to the merchants who got everyone on board. But their cargo is only 4 bales of rice, and that confuses Glaucos. Not that he's a big brain or anything, but it just doesn't make sense to get all this gold just for some rice. Pirates try to explain it, but not very hard. They just say that's the way it is.
The other men aren't questioning. They're picking up pieces of the treasure to take back with them. And one of them noticed that a feast has also been set out for them. So everyone partakes, including Pirros and Glaucos.
Except for Sopho, who's remained behind on the ship. As everyone eats and drinks on the delicious feast and wonderful wine, they notice they're starting to get a little sleepy, slurring their words. They can't say what they mean to say. And then the next thing you know, everybody passes out on the beach. Sopho swims to shore and hides out of the way. The merchants declare that their business has concluded there, and they get back on their ship to go back where they came from. And Sopho drags Glaucos away.
And then Amazons appear on the hillside. We know they're Amazons because we saw the title of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And they start gathering up the remaining unconscious men. Sometime later, Glaucos is awakened by a parrot.
He's the only one that didn't get swept up with the other cargo. I just wanted to point away, when he woke up here, he made this face that reminded me so much of that guy from The Room, the Tommy Wiseau movie, who is always smacking his lips and talks about me underwears. I think you said his name was Mike in the movie, but he's a dead ringer for that guy. It's hilarious.
Glaucos asks the parrot who taught him how to talk with those words. And the parrot tells him that the man who taught him is now in jail. Glaucos hears someone hacking in the distance and runs off to see who it is and tackles the man. It's Sopho. Sopho explains that he doesn't know where they are, but that the other men had been gathered up and taken away by the natives, and they'd have gotten Glaucos too if Sopho hadn't dragged him off.
So Sopho and Glaucos go looking for the other men. They find a cave, and then through the cave there's a secret door.
I want to say there doesn't seem to be a top to this cave. It looks like a set. But Sopho still warns Glaucos not to bump his head as they go in.
Well, they open up the secret door to the cave, and it looks out over a bay, and on that bay is a large city. So Glaucos and Pirros go through that opening and head toward the city.
They walk a little further and come across a small inlet of water with waterfalls, and it looks like a nice place to have a bath. And indeed, there is a woman bathing here. Glaucos addresses her, and she runs to the bushes to clothe herself, and she asks what he's doing out there, and is he from the new cargo? Glaucos doesn't know about this, but he does know that she's the most beautiful woman he's ever seen. Oh, is that so? She giggles, striking a pose. Then she throws her spear at Glaucos. Glaucos catches it and breaks it in half, starts to give a look of smugness, and immediately a rope is thrown over him. He's been captured.
This first Amazon is named Antiope. She's laughing at Glaucos as he's reeled in. She has very unnatural eyebrows. Keeping with the Star Trek theme, she kind of looks like a Romulan. Sopho is still hiding, though. He doesn't get caught. Glaucos tries to fight back. He pulls the Amazon who's lassoed him off her horse, but there's too many of them.
He doesn't realize it's a woman until she goes down and goes, "Oh," with a high-pitched voice, and he's really surprised. He goes, "A woman in uniform? What's going on here?" These things just don't happen.
They never happen. Then Melitta, one of the other Amazon leaders, tells Glaucos that he is in the queendom of the Amazons.
Melitta wants to kill him right there, but Antiope steps in and says that he's communal property and she can't just do that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I didn't catch that.
So next we cut to another quick scene of women bathing, and they're gossiping about Melitta, who is as clumsy as ever, they say, has managed to capture an escaped piece of cargo.
As Glaucos is escorted into the prison cell, Pirros is currently fighting another man. That man claims that Glaucos must have sold them out. But that dispute ends when Glaucos is imprisoned with the rest of them.
This is a very roomy prison cell. There's about a dozen men in here, and there's plenty of room to walk around and fight.
Glaucos tells the men that it's time to think about escaping. They're in the hands of the Amazons. They're all women. That changes the men's minds. They're now happy to stay. But Glaucos is still opting for escape. And he goes to the window where the bars are keeping them out and pulls the bars apart. But Pirros goes over and closes them back up again. I guess he thinks there's no point in running away. According to Pirros, the gods created women to marry men.
At that, Pirros heads to the window to flirt with one of the guards. He calls out, "Hey, cutie," and she hits him in the face with her shield.
So the two decide to strategize.
They'll have to plan an escape, but it's decided to be too risky to break out as a group, so it's pretty much every man for himself.
Now we come across some Amazons doing their training maneuvers. Some are practicing their horse jumps, some are running through flaming hoops. But then we go inside to where the serious business is happening. It's a council meeting. It's women only, of course, and Antiope and Melitta are sparring verbally.
A crowd of senators are seated and listening as Melitta and Antiope argue about how to handle Glaucos.
They call him the Greek.
Melitta's argument is that the virginal Amazons might be tempted by someone like him. Antiope argues that it is necessary to occasionally be with a man to keep their race going, and that the law states that only the queen must be chaste.
They need to continue their glorious bloodline somehow, right?
As they're arguing, the women in the stands throw their heads from side to side in the direction of whoever is speaking / yelling, as if they're watching a tennis match.
We do see the queen, La Regina. She doesn't seem too happy about having to be the chaste one. And in fact, later we'll find out that she's not. But they have the vote, and all are in favor of letting Glaucos live. Melitta doesn't accept this, though. She demands a trial by combat, as is her right. But Antiope says she's just not mad enough for that. However, Melitta does have that right to receive it, so it will happen.
The queen, followed by the high priestess, leaves the room, and as she strolls past the line of soldiers, one of them falls to the ground. It's explained that this one is expecting a baby.
She got pregnant pretty fast. Unless it was a previous cargo, I guess. Now we're in the chambers of La Regina. She's been queen for 7 years, and she's really tired of being a spinster. She and the high priestess set the date for the duel at the next new moon. And then they go back to enjoying their wine because that is the one indulgence they can participate in.
Now we go through the Amazon village and we see all the men doing the baking, the laundry, and gossiping.
I called it Gender Swap Village. Unfortunately, the movie makers chose to demonstrate that the men doing domestic chores makes them very feminine. So they're talking a very swishy tone.
Sofo is still the only man who hasn't been captured, and he sneaks up to a window where a man places a freshly baked pie.
That's Yumio.
Well, Yumio is a little confused where his pie went, and he starts testing by placing other items of food on the windowsill, and each of them disappears when his back is turned. So Yumio goes out to investigate, and he finds Sofo on the ground with the food in front of him. Yumio explains that the food was intended for the head of the guards, and Sofo just says that he's looking for work and that he's a scientist. Then he shows off a telescope that he's invented.
They talk for a little while about his inventions, and then someone yells, "The women! Here come the women!" And the Amazons are returning home to their men. Now they've been practicing all day, and they want their dinner now. And it leads to some stereotypical squabbling, just with the sexes reversed.
And now the new cargo / merchandise, the Greeks from that last shipment, are being brought in, much to the amusement of the old merchandise.
But there's no time to worry about that because it's time for entertainment. Some scantily clad men, gold lame thongs, are doing an erotic dance to contemporary jazz music. They do a little dance on their own, and then they're joined by some Amazons. They do their own routine. Glaucos and Pirros and the rest of the new cargo are watching, and they're discussing their fate. Pirros is looking forward to his mating ritual. But Glaucos worries what happens to them once they've outlived their usefulness in that department.
Pirros says the way around this is to figure out how to extend their usefulness. After the performance, the men are corralled into another room to be hosed down
They turn on the showers. The men don't seem to mind, though.
Then the men are marched out to a stand where it looks like they're going to be placed for auction. The queen stops to ogle the newly washed cargo. But before this can happen, we still have the matter of the trial by combat between Melitta and Antiope. A gong is gonged, and Melitta and Antiope mount their horses and joust.
It doesn't last very long, and Antiope is the winner. She's knocked Melitta off her horse 2 times.
Melitta spitefully tells her to go ahead and do what she likes with that man.
Antiope purrs, "I will," and she selects Glaucos off the rack. He kisses her, and she slaps him. And then she's summoned to go see the queen.
Pirros teases Glaucos and asks if he likes his new groom, but he insists that she's his bride.
And the rest of the women get to divvy up the rest of the men. The men seem to enjoy the process. We meet Nando, he's from northern Greece, and he's picked by one eager Amazon.
Another man seems to be the choice of 2 Amazons. He says that he's God's gift to the women of southern Greece, and then continues, "Let's be off, my babies. Y'all is my women now."
In the queen's chambers, La Regina chides Antiope for kissing Glaucos. If she's going to be queen, she has to take that vow of chastity. Antiope claims that she doesn't care, but the queen warns her that she's going to miss kisses and sex and stuff. She tells Antiope to go to the temple and pray for guidance. She has 3 days to decide what she really wants for her life.
Then there's a scene where women are in the foreground talking about the men they've chosen, and men in the background talking about the women who've chosen them, and they're all talking at once, and you can't understand a word that's being said.
But finally, at the man's store, there are 3 men left, and Pirros is one of them. There's 2 women deciding between the 3 men, and they each pick the other men that aren't Pirros. So he's the last one left. This is because the other women think that Melitta has claimed Pirros for some reason. And indeed she does, but really reluctantly.
So next we see Pirros and Melitta walking along the beach. He's trying to convince her that they should be doing coupley things, but she picked him for another reason. We also see that Sofo is nearby watching them. And so is the parrot.
Melitta doesn't want to do those coupley things, but she does concede that Pirros can help her. In one way, he can convince Glaucos to go to the temple and seduce Antiope, thus ensuring that she won't be queen, and Melitta only has to accept the role. Pirros kind of agrees to this, and then he strong-arms her, pulling her down into a kiss.
After being worn down, she tells him, "All right, but be quick about it." You go back to the village, where the fresh cargo is still enjoying their new situation.
Their honeymoons. Especially the one called Pachyderm, who has at least a dozen Amazons attending on him. But Glaucos and Pirros are alone because their love interest would rather be queen than sleep with them.
So Glaucos and Pirros go to the temple, where we find Antiope kneeling before a statue of her goddess. When Glaucos interrupts her, she's angry. Men who visit the temple are burned alive, she says. Glaucos says that they should run away together because their love for each other is all that matters.
Glaucos pulls her into a kiss, and then Pirros appears to warn them that there are many people outside. This may be a trap set up by Melitta. The 3 of them look for another way out. Behind the altar, there's another room, and that one has a huge door set into the stone, but it's immovable. Not for Glaucos.
Glaucos picks up a pillar to use as a battering ram, and as he rushes the door, Pirros has found a little device in a stone wall. He pulls it open, and the door swings open as Glaucos rushes through it. "You said it was locked," Pirros accuses Antiope.
Glaucos is enveloped in a cloud of dust, but Antiope agrees to take Glaucos to the seashore. Pirros returns to the temple, where he hides behind a pillar just as Melitta is sneaking in.
Melitta notices that the sacred girdle had been left behind, and as Pirros watches, Melitta places the girdle in the mouth of a statue.
On either side of the goddess statue, the big tall one, are 2 smaller statues, and they each have an open mouth. She goes to the left hand, as you face it, side, and puts the girdle in that statue's mouth. And then she leaves.
Pirros comes out from hiding and goes to that statue, pulls out the item, and then moves it to the statue on the right, because Melitta will never look there. He ducks back into hiding as Melitta's soldiers come in. They've all been called to assemble, and they're not dressed for battle because they had been on their honeymoons.
Yeah, they're not really enthusiastic about this either. They'd rather be in bed with their men. Melitta explains that Antiope and the girdle are missing. Here's Antiope's cloak as proof. She's effectively framing Antiope for the theft that she herself committed. And then she tells the women that they need to go find her.
Once they've gone, Melitta goes to retrieve the item, but finds that it's not where she left it.
And Pirros snickers from behind his pillar. because his little plan worked.
And so now the chase is on. There's a jazzy score as the Amazons give chase to Glaucos and Antiope.
This lasts a considerable amount of time. Antiope and Glaucos are headed, looks like up a mountain, and everyone is following them. During the chase, Glaucos is thrown from his horse. Melitta goes into the queen's chamber to rat out Antiope. Another Amazon comes in to report that 2 of the fugitives got away. And there's some confusion as Melitta said that Pirros left too, but he wasn't seen leaving. Then the queen sends them both away as she needs to have a little drink.
We cut away to another ship. The men on the ship aren't intended cargo. They just happen to be passerby, and they're having a problem with their ship. The rudder is broken, but luckily there's an island nearby.
Antiope drops a struggling Glaucos. Glaucos is completely out of it at this point. Antiope complains that one little bump on the head and you're helpless. She kisses him in his unconscious state. He wakes up long enough to say that he needs water, so she heads for a creek. As she does, some Amazons ride up in search of Antiope and Glaucos, but Antiope manages to hide successfully from them.
So the Amazons deduce that they must have escaped, and they'll have to continue their search elsewhere.
Now we're back with the pirates who have come ashore to plunder and pillage, no doubt. They find the prone form of Glaucos, and they kidnap him.
They think he might be useful. Then Antiope returns to find Glaucos is gone.
She assumes that Melitta stole him. But Melitta wasn't there. She's in her chambers being annoyed by Pirros. She's really not in a good mood, and he's not helping any. He alludes to the missing sacred girdle, and she's surprised and angry that he knows about it. She demands that he give it back, but he's not going to do that. He says he has an idea. He'll stay there and be her house slave, and then give her the girdle so that she can be queen. Otherwise, he's going to go to the queen and tell her that Melitta stole the girdle. Furiously, she agrees to this deal.
Meanwhile, Antiope is still looking for Glaucos. She steps into a trap that somehow she missed and is dropped what appears to be miles away to that cave that Sopho and Glaucos had discovered earlier. She runs to the entrance, but bars swing shut, blocking it. So Sopho has been busy making this place his home.
Not only that, he's been busy inventing things. Sopho fills Antiope in on what's been happening while she's been away. She's been accused of stealing the girdle. So Sopho thinks that Antiope should wait there until Glaucos returns to save them both, or at least just her. And eventually they should both leave the island for their own safety.
As he's talking, Glaucos wants to light a candle, so he goes to this large contraption that he's devised.
Sort of a Rube Goldberg type machine.
Lights the end of it, and we see the whole thing going mousetrap style to the end where the candle is lit. And then he asks Antiope if she has ever wondered what becomes of the men after the wedding night.
Well, she should know. She lives there.
But apparently she doesn't, so Sopho is going to show her. He takes Antiope to the secret of the elders. Men are put into slavery and are guarded by bears, and this will keep the women from falling in love and having those kind of ties.
They work in the quarry, never to set eyes on a woman again. In La Regina's chamber, she's scolding Melitta for her male companion. Melitta recommends that they consecrate another girdle and elect a queen. Obviously, that would be Melitta because she's the only candidate left. La Regina lies and says that the law requires they wait 2 moons before they can consecrate another girdle. Then she tells Melitta to leave and to mind her obnoxious slave. Melitta goes, and Regina admits to the high priestess that she made that up, and then the 2 of them drink some more wine.
So Melitta returns home. She's trying to get Pirros to stop blackmailing her and to give up the girdle. And while they're bickering, 2 men bring in a rolled-up rug and leave it against the wall. Pirros suggests that if Melitta were to show him a little more kindness, he'd be more forthcoming.
She snarls at him to back off and give her the girdle or else. Then she storms off. Pirros begins puttering around the house, trying on some jewelry, while the roll of carpet, obviously concealing a person, stands behind him. You see the carpet start to move, and Pirros notices too. He's startled, and he goes over to the roll and unrolls it. And it's Sopho inside.
He's come to ask that Pirros give the girdle to Antiope, but Pirros doesn't want to give up his only bargaining chip. There's a knock on the door, so Sopho is rolled back up into the rug, and at the door are 2 Amazon women who have come to show their accessories to Pirros. He says he prefers simplicity and pockets the jewelry.
Meanwhile, Glaucos and the pirates have returned to that tavern that we saw at the beginning of the movie. I guess they fixed their boat. Glaucos is going on about all the jewels and gold in the Amazon city, but the men aren't sure that they believe him. After all, he did get bumped on the head. He also wants them to help save Antiope, but they decline.
Getting nowhere, Glaucos wanders away from the table. Then one of the pirates comes up behind him and tells him that he does believe him, and that if Glaucos can gather a dozen oarsmen, he can get a ship. So Glaucos causes the ceiling to collapse, knocking most of the pub's customers unconscious. There's your oarsmen. Gather them up and put them aboard. By the time they wake up, we'll have hit the high seas.
If they Shanghai everyone on board. That's the way of it, I guess, back then. On board, the captain still isn't sure about the treasure, but Glaucos says that it's real. But he's withholding further details for now for his own safety.
Back with Pirros and Sofo, they realize that they have to get off this island. Pirros has learned that new shipments of cargo arrive every new moon. So when the next ship comes in, they plan to sneak aboard and get off the island.
It's either that or disappear to the quarry guarded by bears. Melitta is furiously doing drills with the young Amazons. She's not happy with their performance. Back with the pirates, the other men aren't ready to trust Glaucos. He leads some of the men to shore, but he tells them to wait there. He's going ahead to scout out the town and will return in under 3 days to lead them to the gold. They seem to agree.
So we see Glaucos walking through the forest when he's suddenly ambushed by Amazon warriors. Spears and arrows embed themselves into the trees all around him, so Amazons don't have really good aim. And we see that Sofo and Antiope are nearby, and they see this as well. One of the warriors advises Glaucos to come with them, so there's no more trouble. He's not one to fight a lady, though. The Amazons charge and surround him.
Then Sofo decides that if you want a job done, you have to do it yourself. So he brings out his latest invention. It's a boomerang. He throws it Glaucos' way. It swirls around him and then hits him in the chest, and he goes down. And that finally knocks the big lug out.
Now Melitta's on the scene, and she takes charge. She threatens to stab Glaucos, so Antiope will be cooperative, and then brings everyone back to the queen.
Glaucos and Antiope are standing before the queen. Antiope is accused of stealing the girdle, and the queen declares that she must go through the trial of verity to determine her fate. If the girdle is returned, she's innocent. If not, they're going to burn her at the stake. Glaucos, who has insulted the gods, will also be executed in the same manner. Back behind where the queen is standing, in the shadows, Sofo and Pirros sneak into the temple. They hide behind convenient pillars, but eventually they get Glaucos' attention to signal them that they are there.
So Glaucos is set to be burned alive. Sticks and brush are placed beneath his feet, and one of the Amazons tells Glaucos to trust that his friends have not forgotten him.
Glaucos wonders what good that will do, though. Sofo tells Pirros that he has given Antiope the girdle's location. Antiope returns the girdle to Regina. Pirros tells Sofo that they've got to get out of there.
Meanwhile, the pirates have gotten bored of waiting for Glaucos to return, so they've decided to storm the castle. A couple of them are sent up trees and they're catapulted over the walls. The Amazon warriors are put on high alert as the pirates attack.
Some of the warriors who are slingshotted over the castle walls open the gates so that everyone can come in. And now it's a battle royale where everyone, except Pirros, Sofo, and an unwilling Glaucos, start to fight.
Pirros tries to get Glaucos to leave with him, but Glaucos says that he won't run away.
So they decide to go to the work camp and free the men who are being guarded by bears so that they can also help. I guess they're captors?
Yes, Pirros and Sofo can gather the men while Glaucos takes care of the bears. Back at the palace, the battle continues.
The pirates are beaten back by the Amazons, but they regroup and return on horse, circling the wagons. There's literally a covered wagon there. Back at the quarry, Glaucos is fighting a bear, unconvincingly. He wins, and the men escape, riding to go help the girls.
As the men ride into the palace, Melitta sees them and claims the cavalry is here, so she throws down her weapon, as do all the other Amazons, because the men are here and the women don't have to fight anymore.
I hate that part. But the pirates are chased off, and then the idols begin. Glaucos and Antiope are snogging, and a new, softer Melitta gives in to Pirros' love, and they canoodle as well.
Sofo has a potential suitorette in the High Priestess, but he's not interested.
He escapes her clutches, and the current queen decides to change the constitution so that the new queen, Antiope, can have a king, Glaucos. But she's still without anyone to kiss. Aw, and that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we are talking about Colossus and the Amazon Queen from 1960.
Though he was obviously speaking English in Colossus and the Amazon Queen, Rod Taylor's voice was redubbed in the English language version of the film. He claimed to have extensively rewritten the script in the biography Rod Taylor and Aussie in America by Stephen Fagg. AIP added their own score to the film, using elements of ragtime, jazz, and rock and roll.
Costume design of the Amazon warriors deliberately shows off the actresses' left breasts, with a cutout in the left side of their bodysuit that showcases the brightly colored bandeau top they're wearing underneath. This is ostensibly to draw attention away from the right breasts, likely a deliberate reference to the Amazon tribe's alleged practice of amputating the right breast in order to make it easier for the female archers to draw and shoot. This, along with the Amazon's polyester chainmail print body stockings, seems to be an attempt to use costuming to suggest something that the production couldn't afford to make for real.
The Italian title for this film is La Regina delle Amazzoni, which translates as Queen of the Amazons, which makes a lot more sense as there is no one named Colossus in either the Italian or English dubbed version of this film.
I think they just used Colossus as sort of a
exploitative selling point.
Right, and it's almost kind of like a generic name for hero at this point. Colossus and the Amazon Queen was released in Italy on September 8th, 1960, and then it had a 98-minute running time. It was released in the United States in 1964 with an 84-minute running time. And it was released directly to television as part of AITV's Epicolor 64 package, and then later in the Strongmen of the World package.
Colossus and the Amazon Queen is one of the first, if not the first, spoof of the sword and sandal genre films. And this is the only peplum that Vittorio Sala directed.
As you might expect, Rod Taylor was not happy when this movie started airing in the United States. At that point, he had gone on to bigger and better movies. He was the male lead in The Birds. In his fan newsletter, he was asked, "When did you make Colossus and the Amazon Queen? How do you feel about it appearing on television now?" And Taylor answered, A, obviously when I had a lapse of sanity, and B, very embarrassed.
In the May 1987 edition of Starlog magazine, Rod Taylor responded to the interviewer's question about the movie, saying, "You found the skeleton in my closet. To be honest, I had a devious motive for making that movie. It was because of my nasty love life. I was having an affair with Anita Ekberg, and it gave me an excuse to get free airfare to Italy to see her. I've been trying to hide that fiasco ever since. Releasing it now on tape is like digging up a porno film from out of my past."
So now that we know how Rod Taylor felt about the movie, let's talk about how we felt about it. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, the first thing that strikes me is that the title Colossus and the Amazon Queen is not really true to what we see. There's an Amazon Queen who has no face-to-face with any of the characters except for her immediate court. And there's no Colossus here, as we said. And even if we assume that Glaucos is supposed to be the Colossus in the title, there's not really a whole lot of feats of strength here. He does try to tear the mast off a ship, but he's not able to do that.
Well, they stop him. He maybe could have done it, but they obviously don't want to lose the mast of their ship. That's a fatal error in ship sailing.
And he does pick up that pillar to try to break down the door that's already open. And I guess he wrestles a bear.
Right, yeah.
But none of that is as impressive as stuff we would see in other films.
Right, yeah. He did bring down the pillar in the tavern.
Oh, that's right. There was another one. But still, he's no Hercules. He's no Machiste.
True. Ed Fury was a bodybuilder who became an actor, as often happens in these sort of movies.
Yeah, he did a series of a character called Ursus, which I am not familiar with at all.
I did enjoy his performance in the movie, though. He really lent into the silliness of this movie, and this movie is very silly. I thought it was a great palate cleanser because we've been watching a lot of bad Larry Buchanan movies lately. So when we first watched this, I was surprised and pleased at how delightful it was.
Well, a lot of the stuff that is supposed to be funny is, I'm not going to say dated, but it's really old school humor. It's a lot of slapstick. It's people tripping and falling and stumbling, and that kind of thing is more fun to watch in real life than it is to watch in a film.
Well, we can't always engineer that. I did think it was kind of cringy at times, though, like you said, dated. The fact that the men and women switching roles, I like that part of the movie, but then men don't get effeminate just because they do the dishes. And so that was very, like you said, old school, very dated, and didn't really need to be in the movie. But it did seem like the men were very enthusiastic about accepting their roles. They didn't mind being, whether it was on the same level or even below the women that they loved. So when the movie ended, my interpretation was that the men were not going to take over, even though they did take over the fighting, but that it would be more of a cooperative society with men and women participating more or less equally. And it kind of reminded me of the Barbie movie, where all the Kens finally decided that they didn't want to rule, and then the Barbies decided that they didn't want to rule either, and that they could all be a little more fair. Did you think it was funny? I mean, did you?
Yeah, I thought this was a funny film. But when you talk about the ending like that, I just wonder how that society will work. Because I'm assuming if they're bringing in a new cargo of men every new moon, there's going to be a lot of slaves that they had that are suddenly emancipated.
What if they don't bring any more? What if they stop bringing the cargo then?
Well, I'm sure they will. But the ones that they have on the island already, there's going to be probably close to the number, if not more, than there are of the Amazon population.
Well, I think because the cargo of men that we saw that came over with Glaucos and Pirros, it was only maybe a dozen, and there's easily 3 or 4 times that many Amazons. So what I think is that there already were leftover women who didn't have anybody. The queen and the high priestess, for one, the former queen, I should say. And a lot of the women, once they got pregnant, their men went away. But maybe now those men are going to come back.
I'm not talking about the numbers. What I'm talking about is the society that's going to exist. These women are used to being in charge. The men are used to not.
Well, I think a few of the men will assume leadership positions, just like only a few of the women were actual leaders. So they may evolve into a more, like I said, a more cooperative society. They'll train the men in fighting if they need it. Like Glaucos and Antiope are both the rulers now. So it's a king and queen.
Right. But what I'm saying is that I don't think that we're going to see a role reversal based on this happening.
Well, I think most of the men would stay in the roles that they're already in. But a few of them would be leaders. And there would be more of a fairness. There would be no more slavery. They freed the slaves. And now, since they fought for the kingdom, they get to stay free.
Yeah, and why would they want to do that?
Why did they want to come back and fight? They had no incentive to do that either.
That's what I'm asking. Why would that happen?
I would
think they would say, well, good. Get me out of here. And
maybe some of them will. I don't know. But I think just within the realm of the movie that it should all work out.
Yeah, there's a lot in here I don't think you're supposed to look at too closely.
No, of course not. It's a spoof. It's not supposed to be real. And it was wrong of the Amazons to enslave the men in the first place. It should have all been by their choice. How many men wouldn't leap to come on the island with beautiful women and get to be with them? The only downside is that you might have to do some domestic work. Obviously, the men who were brought there against their will didn't mind. So imagine how eager they'd be if they were willing. Well, having said all that, I think it's time for us to rate this movie using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic. Tell me what you think, Jeff.
Well, I enjoyed this movie for the most part. I would say the score was kind of odd at times. There was definitely some interesting choices made there. When we see the montage of the Amazons training, the music sounds like something to be playing in the merry old land of Oz from the 1939 Wizard of Oz.
And when they're dancing, they're doing moves that are like straight out of West Side Story. Very jazzy.
So I'm not really sure what the purpose of this film was, except just to work as a parody. But I guess none of that matters. What I'm judging it is on my enjoyment of it. And it was okay. I'm giving this one an I. This is an intermediate. What'd you think, Cheryl?
I don't have a lot to justify this, but I'm going to give this an A because I did really enjoy it. And it might be just the contrast between all these dreadful Larry Buchanan AIP remakes that we've had to watch that are so badly acted, so badly written, so full of filler and boring stuff that this just was such a breath of fresh air to me. And it did make me think. The fact that it was a parody, I don't even know if there needed to be a parody, but I think they did a good job of it. We've watched a few of the Sword and Sandal movies, and they do all seem to be kind of the same. So the flip that they did for this movie worked for me. So I definitely want to give it an A. So we said all there is to say about Colossus and the Amazon Queen. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And until next time, stay tuned.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.